gamers? I'm Jason.
I'm Julie.
And today on Dice and Dragons, we are going to be previewing/reviewing this upcoming Kickstarter game. This is Earth Rising, 20 Years to Change Our World, published by Stop, Drop, and Roll, designed by Laurie Blake, and it will be hitting the platform, well, Kickstarter that is, on April 26th. So there will be a link down below in the video description in a few days once I'm able to add it to the video. Now, Julie's going to tell you a little bit more about the game itself because, well, you can't go to the link yet.
It is a cooperative game that's intended for 1 to 6 players, ages 10 and above, and plays in about 90 to 120 minutes.
What do you think about that play range, age range, and the time I meant? Sorry.
I think that the age is actually pretty appropriate. I think it's spot on. Obviously, an advanced gamer, somebody who's been gaming for a long time, might be able to play a little bit younger. But I think 10 and above is a good age.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it when we get to the review, but the actions are fairly straightforward. And because it's a cooperative game, you can do any of the heavy lifting that you need. What about the time?
I think that's about right. I mean, we've played it at 2 and at 4 players, and I think the more players you have, the longer it's going to be.
Well, it was actually faster with 4 players. I think it has to go with your experience with the game. Also, our play at 4 was both of us handling 2 characters. I would say that if you are playing 6 players, it's probably going to get closer to that 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
And you had something else that you wanted to add, Julie?
As Jason said, this is a preview review copy, and we are very appreciative of the opportunity to review this, but we'd like to remind our viewers that our opinion remains our own.
Yes, and really happy to check out this game because it is about climate change and promoting sustainable activity, something that we do try to do around the house as much as we can. So what will you be doing in Earth Rising? Well, you have a board, and I just want to mention something. You can see it right now in front. These are the prototype components, so expect them to have changed by the time you do see the Kickstarter in all its glory. So what are you doing? You've got your board. There are different sections of the board that go from politics, energy, industry, agriculture, infrastructure, and culture. Had to look at the board just to get a little reminder there. You will have different characters that are associated with each aspect of the board. And what you're going to be doing is trying to convert unsustainable practices to sustainable practices. You also can't quite see it, but I will actually just do it for effect because it's right in front of us. Something a little new that we can do. You're going to have these different potentials for ecological collapse, and strain will be accumulating on these. In this case, we've got nitrogen, phosphorus loading. I don't know why it's loading, but that's okay. And what you will need to do is manage the strain and convert those sustainable practices, get all the strain off these pieces, then put them in the board as they were previously that you saw earlier. And that is going to let you get more practices to lift all these meeples that are in the center of the board out of poverty, and you need to do it in 20 turns. So make sure that you're efficient, because if you're not, well, you're going to run into some trouble. Also, if too much strain accumulates on different areas of the board, well, you can have some ecological disasters that are going to make things just a lot harder for you in the long run. Did I miss anything, Julie?
Well, as you're trying to do this, the status quo is also going to come up and make things a little bit harder on you and add a little bit more strain and unsustainable practices.
Yes, so how you manage your deck is also a big part of the game, and we're going to talk about all of that in the review. Hopefully you enjoyed us trying something new here, using the board a little bit to showcase and explain the game before we get into the review. Now, for those of you that are new to the channel, because this is a Kickstarter preview, there are timestamps down below if you'd like to just see our opinions on the game. You can click right ahead. Coming up, we're going to be us taking a look at the components, setting up the game, and teaching you how to play. Now, the board is a little big, so I'm not quite sure if I'll be able to showcase the full setup, but we're going to do our best to get you started with what the game is going to be like. Now, Julie, what time is it?
It's time to grab our drink.
Grab our best friend.
And we're going to take a table one more time.
Yeah, we had a nice victory in front of us, but you know what? We're going to set it back up and hopefully we can win again. Now we're going to take a quick look at the components for Earth Rising. Just a reminder that this is a prototype, so these components are not final. For example, we had to print out our rule book with the prototype. I really do like the layout. It's colorful. You get a nice example of it from this printout. Everything is quite clear and straightforward, and we had no trouble figuring out how to play the game. So, thumbs up there. There is no FAQ for the game. However, if you do have some questions about the players, well, I do like the fact that we get some more detailed clarifications. And instead of having FAQs, there are these little notes throughout the entire rulebook to help you figure out what those questions that might be lingering after you read a rule. Now we're going to start with taking a look at the components over here before we take a look at the board. Another example of a difference between the prototype and the main game. This board is now going to be circular in the final version. Here we've got the year cards, so it goes from 2021 to 2041. We've got 20 years to change the world. These are the strain tokens that are going to go on the ecological burdens that we have on their more colorful side for the moment. These symbols represent ecological collapses that may occur due to different burdens that then fill up spots on your board, meaning that you cannot use them. Here we've got the rising degrees, which counts as people in poverty, which we'll explain in the how to play. And as you can see, there are 3 tokens, 1, 2, and 3 degrees. And if you ever have a 4th collapse, well, too bad, that is game over. Now here are the ecological burdens. So these are the major burdens. They're divided up into water withdrawal, chemical pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and nitrogen phosphorus loading. You'll see that they're also colored for different areas and sectors of the board. And once you are able to get rid of the strain from those burdens, well, what's pretty awesome is you can actually get them into play on the board and use the area to get people up out of poverty. So here we've got the minor burdens, same thing with the color coding, and you'll notice that slightly different than their counterparts because you don't have all of the same burden in the same area. Here we just have the different meeples to represent the people. There are about 40 of them that you're going to have in the game. We're going to take a look at the cards now, and this once again is where you're going to see some placeholder images. So as you can see, each card is divided into a sustainable, unsustainable practice. That becomes important with certain actions in the game, but it's not necessarily important when it comes to disbanding an action or even necessarily putting one into play. Well, it depends on the cards you have. You do have to pay attention. If one of these is already in play, you cannot put it into play. So, for example, with culture, ethically sourced goods, single-use clothing, infrastructure, zero-carbon communities, centralized metropolises as unsustainable. That's how it's divided. White is sustainable, black is unsustainable, and you've got different colored cards for every sector. Now, there's a set amount of cards, so keep that in mind as you are playing the game. Now, the forces of the status quo will strike back. There'll be 3 of these in every game, so not one for each sector. You'll decide at the start during setup which ones are going to go in randomly. And what you need to do is draw 1 influence card plus 1 for each sustainable practice. Sometimes having an area of the board that's not all that sustainable can work in your favor if that status quo card comes up. Now here we've got all the tokens. Now I'm not going to take a look at all of them. Once again, this is placeholder art. You'll see the sustainable side and then the unsustainable side. And you've got that for all of the different sectors. We then have the different player cards, so the people that we can be, the ecologists. So as an action, you may place a regeneration token on any sustainable practice, which reduces 1 extra strain during the societal strain phase. And for each extra sustainable practice, you can get sustainable agriculture practice. Got to be clear. You can get an extra regeneration token. Now, the eco investor gets to draw an extra card whenever they're drawing one. They can give it to another player or place it at the bottom of the deck. So if you see a status quo card, great way to avoid it. Then for each sustainable infrastructure practice, they can draw 1 extra card. The climatologist, who's associated with energy, and the eco investor, I didn't say it was infrastructure. And anytime during the 4 actions of anyone's turn, you may move 1 strain to a different burden. And for each sustainable practice, you may move 1 extra strain. So it's pretty cool because you can do it during, and it might free up a burden that you can then get into play. For the innovator, as an action, you may place 1 startup token. So these are a startup token. Sorry, I didn't mention it. The regeneration token is right here into the center of the board, and then place a meeple on it. They do not count towards poverty strain, which is pretty cool. Then for each sustainable industrial practice, you may place 1 extra startup token. So he covers the industry sector. Next, we've got the activist. So as an action, you may place a protest token on any unsustainable practice. This allows players to flip it to sustainable instead of disbanding it, which is very cool. And you can place multiple tokens for each sustainable culture practice. She's the culture area. And then lastly, we've got the grassroots politician. As an action, you may check the next 2 cards in the societal influence deck and rearrange them. And you may do that for 1 extra card for each sustainable political practice. So these are the different characters that you have. These are the components for Earth Rising. Now, keep it right here, as I'll be coming back at you with our setup and then how to play the game. Now, before we teach you how to set up Earth Rising, I just want to give you a nice overview of the board. I normally do it during the components, but as you can see, this board is rather large and it just sort of made sense to do it in setup. So as you can see, you've got a sector for the discard pile. You've got the ecological ceiling, the different sectors of agriculture and infrastructure. Then as we move this board up, we're also going to set it up. You can see that we've got industry, energy, politics, and culture. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I will be fully setting up the game, but just for filming purposes, as this board is a little bit of a space hog, I'm going to leave the top part of the board cut off. It's not going to affect anything that we do during setup. Everything that I'm going to be doing in these sectors will also be done in these upper sectors. I may just be switching out some of the cards just to get some of the ones that are in the right color to show you how to play the game. Now, first and foremost, we need to take these status quo cards out of the deck. We're going to need to shuffle all of our social and influence cards together to form the, social influence cards to form the influence deck. And we're going to get that ready. Now, what I also want to do is pick the characters, as you're going to be dealing 2 cards to each character. And in this case, what I'll do is we'll do a 2-player setup. 2 turns is a good amount of turns to teach you the game. Julie and I have played a lot with the ecologist and the innovator, so we'll be picking those 2 characters, and I'll be grabbing the components related to them. Now we need to shuffle up these nasty status quo cards. And actually, I'm going to just move the board over a little bit more this way. I'm going to try to center it more, actually. And we can still see the calendar here. I'm going to bring the ecologist and the innovator over here. I've got a little bit of space over here to place their cards. It'll just help me keep things a little clearer. So we're going to deal out 3 status quo cards. We then deal out 2 cards. So I'll flip this over. We've got infrastructure and politics. These are going to the ecologist. So I just put them on the edge of our table near the ecologist. Here we've got infrastructure and repairable designs going to the innovator. Now, what I need to then do is split the deck as evenly as possible. The rules say 14 cards on top of each of these, but in the prototype, that's not what we have. So just split it as evenly as possible. As I said, this is a prototype, so there's going to be some stuff that's changing. So just peel it all out. I made a mistake there, but it's not a big deal. You get the idea as to what you're doing, because you want to have those status quo cards at the bottom part of each deck. Well, bottom third of each deck, that's a great way to say it. As you can see, once I get those 4 cards, I don't really get an even amount. We then stack them all together, and this makes our influence deck. Now, in each sector, we need to place the unsustainable practices of the status quo into play. Now, I'm just taking these out so that you can see them. Actually, we'll start with culture. We'll place 2 unsustainable practices. Now I'm going to put them as close to me as possible, just so that they're easy to reach and I can keep them in play. I will pile the tokens up on this side. You can spread them out however you want. Each unsustainable or sustainable practice is capable of lifting 2 population out of poverty. So keep that in mind. You definitely don't want to have a lot of people in poverty. Don't believe you can see the agriculture, but I'll try to get it on camera. Place the infrastructure. And then we'll place our politics. We'll then need to start placing the meeples around the board, as well as getting our strain tokens out. Now you'll see that this looks different than what's in the rulebook. Part of the reason for that is just for filming purposes. In the rulebook, to have it set up like that, it's just easier to remember that you take this away, you got to take this meeple away as well. It doesn't really matter how you do it though, as long as you're following the rules while you're playing the game. So each sustainable practice each practice, whether unsustainable or sustainable, will lift 2 people out of poverty. So we were going to have the entire surrounding board filled up with meeple tokens as we start the game. And then to keep things simple for us for counting, you want to have the population that is in poverty divided up by 3, rows of 3 in the middle, just to keep things a little simpler when it comes to the different strain phases. I think I have a meeple that ran away on me, but I will track him down and get him. Oh, I don't have him running away. He's ran into the middle. I'm so used to having them separated from our last few games, but we had a nice victory and didn't have anyone separated anymore. So we're just stacking them in rows of 3 because each row of 3 represents poverty strain. And remember, you probably want to stand them up during your game. I'm lying them flat just because it looks better for the camera. We have our population in poverty. We've got our calendar card starting at the year 2021. I'm grabbing the regeneration tokens now for the ecologist. So he's ready to help regenerating the planet. The startup tokens for the innovator. One of these decided to run away. We're going to get the strain out here, down by the influence deck. I just have it lying on the table, so I'm just pushing it in right now. You have a good idea. Oh, there's my innovator token and an extra regeneration token. So we are just about done the setup. For the reference, just for the turn, I'm going to have the reference card out and available. So this will be just over here so that you can see it. I think it might be getting a little, it's actually getting whited out by the camera, but I'll have a reference card available as I go through the different actions that can be taken during the turn. And then the last thing that we need to do is to get the burdens in play. Now, some of them you're not going to be able to see just because of the camera. I tried to do my best with regards to setting it up. And actually, you know what? We're going to move these tokens further up. It's a little bit out of reach. Not that much fun for me, but it's going to work better with how I need to set up the board. And it's possible that I might take some of them down just because it doesn't work well with showing you everything on camera. So you're going to want to take the yellow sections and then flip them over to their ecological burden side. I'm going to do that for every section of the board, and you'll notice that at the bottom they'll be cut off just because of the camera. And it will be the same for the top, but you get the idea as to how you'll be setting this up. And I will be setting up the top part of the board. I'm just not going to do it on camera because it's going to affect me reaching over. It's just not going to look great. Now you'll want to have the ecological collapse tokens available, as well as Celsius tokens. And when you're setting up the game, you're going to have to place some strain onto the board already. And just for a quick reference for myself, pretty sure I know how to do it. Yeah, I've got it. But you can see it right here. You're going to want to have two strain on the minor burden and one on the major burden. So we're going to get that into play. And there you have it. We have now set up, that is a different token that got mixed in with the strain. So here we've got 2 on climate change, 2 on biodiversity loss, 1 on the upper part. You'll see it quite clearly on chemical pollution and water withdrawal. You'll see it here on land conversion. I'll try to keep them down here on biodiversity loss. And I'm going to go set up the side for agriculture and infrastructure. But there you have it. As you can see, not that difficult to set up. It looked a little bit more complicated as I was just taking my time, making sure that we were clear as to what we're doing. And keep right here as I'll be right back to teach you how to play the game. Now we're going to teach you how to play Earth Rising. Now for those of you that were following from the setup, I did tweak the cards that were in each character's hand. So the ecologist has an agriculture card, and I wanted to make sure that the innovator has one of the industry cards. It's just going to make for a better explanation as I teach you how to play the game. Now, each character can take 4 actions on their turn. So let's review what these actions are. So the first thing they can do is disband an unsustainable practice. Now, there are 2 ways to do that. You can either do it in your own sector by spending 1 card of the same color. So the innovator needs to spend 1 industry card in the sector to disband an unsustainable practice. It's the same thing to create a sustainable practice. 1 card will get the job done. Now, we'll take a look a little lower in the deck. Try to find something. Well, here we go. This works perfectly. I'll just leave that face up for now. If, for example, the innovator wanted to do anything in the culture section, it would require them to use 2 cards of the same color. So it's going to cost you more to do things in the different sectors of the board. Same thing as if you'd like to bring down once the burden is doesn't have any more strain, you want to get it into play. If you want to get biodiversity loss in, well, you're going to have to spend the card to do it in the culture section. If you're the innovator, in the industry section, you can bring down that section into play for free. Let's just take a quick look at what that looks like. So you got nothing left on biodiversity loss. So you've cleared that burden. Here, you've also cleared the minor burden. You can then flip that down into play. Now we'll discuss what you need to do to get this minor burden into play. So in order to get this last piece of culture in, you'll have to have brought down the infrastructure and the politics major burdens before you can put this piece in. You got to have the 2 pieces next to it to get this last piece into play. So that's another action you can do on the turn. No, I was going to talk about it later. It just makes sense to bring it up now because it goes well with how you're going to be using cards in other areas. So straightforward once again, your own color, 1 card disband, create. Not your own color, 2 cards, disband, create. So we've covered those actions. The other actions we have, you may clean up for strain. So this is from any ecological burden. Now it can be all from one. So for example, if this had 4 on climate change here, you could get rid of all 4, or it can be 1 from different strains, or it can be 2 and 2. It's completely up to you. You may draw an extra card during your turn, or you can decide to take the discard pile and reshuffle the deck. Now, when that's typically going to happen is when you get on the 1 card left in the deck, because it's guaranteed that this is a status quo card. So definitely want to reshuffle before someone has to draw that card. So there you have it. We've taken a look at the 4 actions. Let's now take a look at what happens on your turn. Now, we're in year 2021. Each turn is a full year. The innovator is going to go and draw their 2 cards, and that's fantastic. We've got 3 industry cards, so just a lot of stuff that we can do. Unfortunately, not much we can do in the energy sector, but the industry is looking good. Now, we have to remember that each of these brings 2 people out of poverty, whether these practices are unsustainable or sustainable. And having 3 of these gives us a lot of good stuff that we can do. You can already see we have planned obsolescence that was in play. So we're going to just take this right off the bat, and we're going to disband planned obsolescence. And what happens, those 2 people go down into poverty. It's not a big deal, though, because we're going to be putting synthetic textiles, repairable designs and cooperative social enterprise into play, which is going to lift those 2 people back out of poverty. So here we go. So we put these 2 sustainable practices into play. That's going to be a total of 3 actions. And as we've got 2 sustainable industry practices in play, we really want to do something cool, and we want to get more people up out of poverty. Now we have 1 action left. The other thing we can do is we can take a card and pass it to another player. Currently, giving an energy card to the ecologist doesn't make any sense. It's nothing they can do in the energy sector, and it's not like we've got an agriculture card that's going to help them out. Now, if the climatologist was going to play soon, passing this to them would be potentially a good idea. But even still, we really want to take advantage of having 2 sustainable practices, because we can place 3 tokens, so it's 1 plus 1 for each sustainable practice. And we're just going to lift these 3 people into startups, and they're now out of poverty, which is going to reduce the amount of strain we're going to take in the poverty phase, which is now coming up. So we need to count the total amount of people in poverty, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, you may be wondering why I'm counting 5 is because only sets of 3 count. If this guy was somewhere on the board, it would be 4. If they were on the board, it'd still be 4. They're on the board, still 4. At that point, it would then be just 3. So in any case, you've lifted people out of poverty. We've got 5 strain. We're going to put strain on the board going clockwise. We'll start 1 on biodiversity loss, climate change, chemical pollution, water withdrawal at the top there, and nitrogen phosphorus loading. You can't see it. So that covers the strain for those people in poverty. Next, we have to count the ecological strain that's on the board. Now, it's fairly straightforward at the start of the game because there's 2 per sector, except right now in industry. So we've got a total of 6 sectors, meaning we've got 10 strain, 11 with what's left over. We do have 2 sustainable practices, though, which count against the strain that we have. So we get a total of 11 minus 2, which gives us 9. So we're going to go around the board placing 9 strain. We'll start here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now these lower minor burdens can only hold 5 strain. After that, you're moving into the major burdens, and when these reach a total of 15, you suffer an ecological collapse, meaning you get these nasty tokens in play, and the planet's temperature goes up by 1 degree. So that ends year 2021. We're now in year 2022 as the ecologist gets to take their turn. Now they are going to draw 2 cards. And we're off to a pretty good start here as well. So we're going to make these 2 locations. We're going to, well, not locations, we're going to practices. We're going to do regeneratively farmed meat and polyculture farming and put them into play. Now those are off the board so you will not see them, but what I'll make sure to do is place the regeneration tokens into play. So I'll actually place these here for the moment. I'll move them actually just over here. I believe that they're on camera and visible right now. And that was my first 2 actions with the ecologist. The next action I'm going to be is to put into play regeneration tokens, as these are going to really help combat some of that strain. So we can put one on each sustainable practice, put the other one with regeneratively farmed meat, and then we'll just move them back to their proper position even though they're off camera. The reason why I wanted to put both practices into play was to get more regeneration tokens, which is going to add up more over the long run rather than just discarding an unsustainable practice. I've only got 1 energy card. I'll pass that over to the innovator, as now they're able to do something in the energy sector the following turn. Leaves me 1 action left, which I'll use to clean up for strain. Now I could go all around the board, but I want to make my life easier. I'm just going to pick it all up off in one place. Now we once again have to count the strain. As you can see, it gets rather difficult. We're going to have 5 once again from poverty. It's 5. And now the board's starting to look a little bit better though, as we have for the bad stuff, we've got a total of 10, 11, but we get extra regeneration because of these tokens. So we've got 11, minus 2 is 9, minus 2 is 7, minus the other 2 from the top over there, brings us down to 5. Plus we got the other sustainable practice, meaning 4. Now we're only going to be putting on another 4 strain, which is going to help us out a lot in the long run. So you can see we're building a nice engine to get rid of strain. Now this will go into 2023. The ecologist will, well, the innovator will draw 2 cards. They get 2 infrastructure cards, and then it will be their turn. So that's how you play the game. Let's take a look now at what will happen when you get a status quo card, as well as dealing with an ecological collapse. So first and foremost, let's take a look at the status quo card. This one is for infrastructure, not that dangerous. Let's see what the other one is. Perfect. We've got a status quo card right now for industry. Let's say this was the one that we drew. Now all sorts of bad stuff happen. So first we have to draw 1 influence card and follow what it says. So you have to first add any unsustainable practice to the board. Now if it's already there, you have to add 2 strain. First thing we drew was centralized distribution. Trying to see if it had centralized distribution. So this nasty and sustainable practice would come onto the board. Now because we've got 2 sustainable practices in industry, we got to draw 2 more. So in this case we drew overproduction. It's already on the board, so we check out 2 strain. At this point we have to draw 1 more card. Here we've got biomass converters, and we'll have to put that one now into play. As you can see from this 1 card, our board state got a lot worse. Now I'm going to review the rules with you for the ecological collapse. Using the ecologist and the innovator, this didn't happen in our games. So I want to make sure that we go over this quite clearly. So what will happen in an ecological collapse? So first and foremost, remove 10 strain from the burdens that cause the collapse, 5 from each. You will draw an influence card and place an ecological collapse token within the sector that matches the card. So let's say we had a collapse. At this point, we would have 15 here. We'd remove 5. So this would be down to 5. It would have been at 10. We would remove everything from the lower burden. and then draw an influence card. And then this is where we would place the ecological collapse. And we place on the leftmost vacant circle. We can pick whichever one we want. Now, it's no longer available to us for the rest of the game. And then each time the ecological collapse occurs, you gotta place one of these rising temperatures into the center of the board. Now this will count as 2 people because it's +1. If this was a second ecological collapse, well, this is +2. This would count as 2 people. The third would be +3. So you're really starting to run into some trouble with what's going on in poverty. And there you have it. Those are all the mechanics of the game. What you need to do is get your strain down, get all your sectors in, get sustainable practices, as many sustainable practices as you can to lift everyone up out of poverty in order to win the game. Now, we've covered how to play it. Julie and I are going to review it, so keep it right here, and we'll be back in a flash. Earth Rising, 20 years to change our world. What did you think of the game?
Definitely an interesting concept, and was a lot of fun to try to figure out and to learn with the different concepts. Definitely an easy game as well, in the sense of it's not hard to learn. It's fairly straightforward what you have to do. There wasn't a lot of teaching involved in the mechanics of the game.
No, the actions are very straightforward. How you're going to disband an unsustainable practice, how you're going to set up a sustainable practice. The advantages of having your different players also are quite clear. I would say that the most complicated aspects comes with regards to counting the strain and then managing for an ecological collapse. And then the decision making. So while the game is definitely user friendly in terms of why, what I want to say is that's one of the reasons why you can play it with 10 above. And I think that's a good age range for it because of the actions that you're going to be taking. It does have a lot of complexity as to how you're going to take those actions and work together as a team in order to save the world and change it for the better, because you do only have 20 turns. And if you happen to have skipped ahead, it's really important to note that each player's turn counts as 1 year. So 20 years, my turn is 1 year, her turn is 1 year. So if you are playing a 2-player game, each of you will get 10 turns. If you're playing a 4-player game, it's down to 5. And then at 6 players, the max player count. Some people have 4, some people have 3. So you really have to be efficient and smart in terms of what you're doing in the game, which actually kind of bit us in the butt a few times.
Well, yeah, so I mean, I would say the cards definitely have an impact on the game and how you're drawing the cards, because as we were playing the first game, the cards definitely were in our favor. We just didn't strategically play very well, and we ended up running out of time.
Yeah, we really ignored the culture and politics region of the board. Just wasn't part of our overall strategy. And that's one thing that I will say for newcomers to the game. You got to try to play the board as evenly as possible. There's a set number of cards of every color in every sector of the board. Once they get into the discard pile, you're going to have to reshuffle to get them back in. So you got to pay attention. If you don't want to play like the entire field just because you've got some better actions, that's fine as well. But count your cards in terms of, like what's going into the discard pile so that you remember to reshuffle when you need to.
I don't know if you need to count your cards.
No, but just know what's gone by. I mean, if you're trying to get... Yeah, exactly.
I don't think you have to count them. That being said...
Same thing.
Second time we played a little bit more strategically, but the cards really weren't playing in Jason's favor. And it really slowed us down.
So why don't we talk a little bit why I played the ecologist, who plays the regeneration tokens, who can really help get rid of strain, and Julie was
so I was going to say, I was playing the innovator, and I get to pull people out of poverty, or basically leave them in poverty, but they no longer count in the poverty.
They're doing an innovative practice that, they're not poor, but they're not part of the sustainability of the world yet.
So I was doing fairly well at bringing them out of poverty, but you weren't being able to put the innovation tokens. And
the
regeneration tokens basically have each sustainable practice basically count as 2. So, we thought we were doing really well. partway through, like middle, once we got the engine going, but we still ran out of time.
We just started running into we weren't getting the right cards, and there's definitely that random aspect. Now, this is a game actually, and I think we're both going to agree here, and I was surprised. There are some advantages playing at lower player counts, but this game is definitely designed for the higher player counts because you can get a lot more randomness mitigation with the different characters all coming into play. So in total, we've tried 4 of the 6 characters. I've also played as the activist, and Julie's played as the...
I played as the eco-investor, and I would say they're not all of the characters' powers are equal at lower player counts, but I would definitely say they all have something that they can add. And I would say that playing with 4 players or 4 characters definitely made the game easier. Now, it doesn't make it easy. It just makes it easier to mitigate some of the other aspects, because like my character allowed me to draw extra cards, which allowed me to pass out some resources.
And that made a huge difference. And talking about the 2-player versus the 4-player, your success, I feel, at a 2-player game, and Julie can disagree with me, is building your engine to handle strain. So taking the innovator and the ecologist and making sure that strain is not going to be a problem on the board, just with your sustainable activities, really removing it for yourself. That way you can focus on, getting the right cards, building more sustainable practices in the regions that need it, and drawing more cards if you need to, because that's going to be a big aspect of the 2-player game. Julie playing the eco-investor really made a huge difference in the 4-player game, especially once she got a lot of sustainable infrastructure practices. She was just handing out cards, letting us make some really good decisions and smart plays. Also, having the protester who I was playing was really cool because I was able to take some unsustainable practices, and instead of letting us disband them, I was able to actually get them converted to sustainable practices, which was pretty cool. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the game. And while I don't think the eco-investor and the protester would do nearly as well as the ecologist and the innovator as a 2-player team versus the other 2-player team, at the 4-player level, they worked very well together. And as Julie said, it made it easier, but we still won at the last turn. And I would have to say, if you have experience with cooperative games and engine building games, your biggest enemy is going to be time rather than the threat of ecological collapse and having multiple ecological collapses just go awry. In all honesty, in all of our plays, that was never a concern for us.
Yeah, I would say I think the biggest thing we found, and I have to say it's probably my only or biggest frustration with the game, and maybe it's because we haven't played it enough, but the randomness of the cards at the end. The last game we had our engine well under control and we had a plan. The cards just weren't coming up. So the last 2 turns, I'd say, for my characters, I was just hoping to draw the right cards. And for me, that's a little bit frustrating when you're playing a game like this.
And I gotta agree with Julie. That is definitely one of my biggest frustrations, is the randomness that you get with the deck of cards. And I get it. I understand it. I think it might be mitigated even more at 6 players because you'd be tossing those cards around to other people who can take single actions to improve their sector. That's one of the big differences. If you're going to be making a sustainable practice or taking one of those ecological, disasters and putting them into the center of the board, if it's in your sector, well, you can use 1 card to create a sustainable practice or disband an unsustainable, and it's also free to get that piece of the board into play. And that was something that really helped us out a lot. But once again, the area as well. We had a little bit of frustration with culture, but that was going well. But we didn't have anyone in politics and energy, and those 2 sectors were probably the biggest thorns in our side until right up until the end of the game.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that I didn't like. Overall, I don't think we can really comment on like the components because what we have is a prototype. They're going to change. I like the meeples. They have good quality. Those are going to be the same. The board is colorful. It actually reminds us of CO2. And I find that interesting because it's a similar game to CO2. Much less of a brain burn. So if you tried CO2, you like ecological themed games, and that one's too much for you, you're definitely going to want to think about picking this one up. I'd have to say the only other negative I have with the game, and I understand it, it works well for the mechanic, especially the fact that each turn is 1 year, but the upkeep is tedious. Not gonna lie, having to put out the strain after every player's turn is something that just isn't all that much fun. Especially with the size of the board, you can't just easily put it out. And I'm sure you can just set up the board however way you want it. You don't have to have those sectors sticking up like you will see during the Kickstarter. You could probably just put them all in front of one player, and that would help out a lot. But it, it's not as thematic. I like it being those sectors in the right spot. It's also easier to remind you which is which. Otherwise, you're probably gonna have to find some way to make your own reminders.
I don't think I have anything else to add.
No, really looking forward to this hitting Kickstarter. I want to see what's been changed with the game. I think we've got a solid cooperative game here that we've had a lot of fun with.
With a very thematic and apropos theme, I would say.
Yes, and I didn't even know this at the time, but it's Earth Week this week, and we are releasing this game during Earth Week. So it's pretty cool, and happy to see the Kickstarter coming up the week after Earth Week. So definitely apropos and thematic for where we are at.
Yep.
Well, where we were at, I'd say no, just the time of the year. That sounds better. Now, Julie, what is your score for Earth Rising?
I'm going to give it a 7 because at 2 players, I found it a little bit clunky, but at 4, and I believe, as we said, higher player counts, this is one of these games that I think would shine at a game night. I think it would be a lot of fun, different from those really long games. I think this could be a lot of fun with the higher player counts.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the 6-player count. I think 5 might be the sweet spot. Everyone gets an equal amount of turns with 5 players. But we'll try it at 6 at some point. I agree with Julie. I got to give this one a 7. The upkeep, as well as just the randomness, really comes into effect at 2 players because you just don't have as much of a card pool. That's the advantage of the 4 players and having characters like the Equal Investor. You really are expanding your cards and your options, and you're fully able to utilize all of the actions like trading cards, something that came into play a lot less in the 2-player game. So it's a 7. It's a solid game. If you are environmentally minded, eco-friendly, this is definitely a game that you're going to want to check out on Kickstarter. Now, with that being said, Julie...
And if you like a good co-op.
Yes. So, with that being said, we're going to go back a few seconds. What time is it?
It's time to remind everybody to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we have some new content for you.
And take a look down below in the video description. You'll find links to all of our social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you'd like to see pictures of Julie and I playing Earth Rising, there'll be plenty on those feeds. Also, if you're looking to pick up a new board game, take a look at our link to multizone.ca, great Canadian board game store. You'll get 10% off when you click that link, and a portion of that purchase will go back to us, so it's a great way for you to support the channel as well. And then once the Kickstarter has been released, you will also be able to find the link in the video description. So if you want to check out the game, pledge, you'll have all the information that you need. And then popping up in front of us are going to be links to some of our previously released videos. So over here is going to be our most recent release. I think I know what Julie wants to go over here.
I don't know. Which one did you think?
Well, the most apropos would be CO2.
Yes, the brain burner.
Yeah, one of those games that we haven't played in a long time, but I don't think it's ever leaving our collection.
Yeah.
So now what time is it?
Time to grab our drink. Oops.
Making some noise. Grab our best friend.
We're gonna keep playing games.
Keep playing games.